What's up everybody, it's Gary here for GenVFX. Today we're going to talk about making a planet shader in Blender. The texture system in Blender is absolutely superb, and we can use that quite nicely to help us create a height map from black to white that we can then use to colour an environment, whether that be on a sphere, whether that be on a box, doesn't really matter, but we're going to do this on a sphere because that's what basically makes up a planet. So here we are, we're in Blender 2.90. and we're going to create ourselves a brand new scene, which we've got because we've just opened it up. And I'm going to get rid of that cube, and I'm going to add instead as a mesh a UV sphere. Now if I zoom in a little bit so we can see it, let's pop open the little panel and let's increase our segments and rings just so we've got a little bit more surface information, just to make it a bit more readable as a sphere. Anyway, change it to shade smooth in the objects panel, and then we're going to pop straight over to shading. Now what we're going to do is, in order to allow this to look like a planet, is we're going to change a few things in the window. We'll change it to the scene lights, and we're going to change that to the studio setup. And I'm going to change it to the studio setup because actually, even though it's not accurate for the sky at night, it's actually quite good for highlighting certain areas. I'm going to add a new shader, which is a principal shader like this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by trying to generate very quickly a height map as basically the textural factor on a color ramp. So we're going to add in here, first of all, a texture. We're going to add a Musgrave texture. Now what we're going to do is we're going to press Ctrl T here, and that creates straight away our mapping coordinate space. And it is generated, and it says to point because that's what the standard is. Just change that to texture. So we're going to take the Musgrave, we're going to drag the height and drop it into the base color. Now obviously that doesn't look very fractally. It is, but it doesn't look it because it's got very little fracture data in there. So we're going to change this and increase the detail. Now obviously, increasing the detail, we need to reduce the dimension, which allows us to get the scale size, but gets more information in there, so you can see that. There's a lot of black and a lot of white, and part of that is because we're using the FBM noise type. So we're going to change that to multifractal, and what you'll see straight away is we get a lot more greys and whites. In fact, we're also getting there are some very hot areas which you can't really see, but I'll show you in a second. That's really quite nice. It's very moon-like, and that's not a bad thing. No, we quite like that. To explain very quickly, a Musgrave texture gives us values not necessarily between 0 and 1. At the moment on that you can see what we've probably got is no zeros because we've got no pure blacks. And we have what look like really highly detailed areas of white. And that's because that is in fact higher than 1. It's higher than white. So what we're going to do is we're going to add, from the converter, we're going to add a map range. And I'm going to drop that into here between the base color and there. Now the moment I do that, you can see what's happening. It's actually flattening everything off. It's saying, well, we're assuming that our base range of information that's coming in is between 0 and 1, so I can't give you any higher values. It's essentially what it's doing is it's clamping everything. So what we're going to do is going to go from the max. We're going to say, let's just move the max value up, the input value that's going in. We're going to increase that to get it to be accurate, so it does give us those white values. So if we look a bit closer here, we zoom, there we go, we can just say that's white, that's white. As soon as it starts to like become a mush, that's when essentially we are clipping. So by increasing the value that's going into the remap, that tells us what our actual value is before it starts to mush. So that's pretty good. 3.2 looks about right. So it really was super hot. And then the minimum value, well that's not 0, it's grey. So we want it to go to 0. So I'm going to just hold my finger on shift and very gently drag through this until we start to see some black actually at the bottom. There we go. If we look here, there we go. So that's lovely. So now we've got areas of black and areas of white, and that straight away is pretty much a height map, which is great. Just to give you an idea of what I mean, I'm going to go into converter and get a color ramp, and this I'm going to plug very quickly, I don't know why that's minimized, into between the map range and the actual color. So if I drop this in here like this, the resultant values of 0 to 1 are going into the factor. Now that's really important because the factor itself essentially is saying, in terms of where the colour exists on this ball, or I'm going to call it a planet, where the colour exists on this planet is based on the height coming out of this Musgrave. So if I go here and I can change this black, sorry, and I'm going to change up that, and up that, and up that, and I shift it over here so I can just see what's going on. And I'm going to make that a blue, that. And I'm going to bring that to here. I'm going to take this white and I'm going to bring this white down to about here. So what we can dictate here is exactly where our land is and how much of this is water. We can do it very quickly here like this, or we can separate it and do it individually later if we like. That we've got 70% land and 30% water. Now really that wouldn't necessarily be correct. If we're going to be realistic, it's probably more like this way around. And you can see straight away that whereas the ratio is probably correct, all the lands look too small. So let's go in here, and if we increase the scale here, decrease the scale here, you can see we start getting land masses, more of them, and again they're too small. So what we do then is we're able to take this down and take this down until we have a reasonable visual ratio here of what is land and what is water. So once we've done this, and that's quite nice actually. I quite like that. Yeah, that looks not too bad at all, especially on that particular side. So what we can do is we can say, right, okay, well that's the case. Well then this I'm going to change to slightly sandy color, and then I'm going to go here and I'm going to make a new color, which seems to have, where's that dropped itself? A new color. Where's the new color? There are our new colors. There we go. And you'll start to see we're getting some sort of level of different colours going on in here. So let's hit this up to the top and make that white as if it's a snow cap. Let's make it properly white by removing all of the saturation. There you go. Let's make this grey. Let's shift it up to there. And then because that's selected, we'll pop another colour in between. And let's make that green. Let's make it like this. A little bit darker. Push that up. Push this one down. Let's push this one up, and then we'll stick this one down here, and we'll change that so it's a bit more of a green. There we go. And you can start to see what we're ending up with is some, basically, it's pretty much the basic structure of a planet. We have land and we have water. That's all fine and dandy, but sometimes you want to do other animations like animating the height of the water or whatever. Well, we can do that as well. But before we do that, I just want to go back here, and I'm going to very quickly, let's just rename this. Let's just press N on the keyboard so we can see that. And the label on this, let's make that Earth. Okay, and just by making it Earth, what I'm going to do very quickly is I'm going to go into this bottom one, the blue. I'm going to make it brown. I'm going to make it high, like a sand sort of colour. And I'm going to bring it down here and here, and shift this down a little bit as well. So what we're doing basically is we're just kind of making that, it's just going to be our land. And there's a reason why I'm doing that, is because we're now going to make a duplicate of this. We're going to Shift D, shift that down. We're going to bring this factory to here like this, drop that in there. I'm going to change this, and we're going to make this our water. So very quickly, let's just pick that top one and go delete, 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 delete. Get the bottom one here, and we'll make this one blue. Oh yes. And the top one here, we're going to go and make this one blue. A nice blue. And I'm going to bring this down. So that if we drop this now into the colour, if you watch. There you go. That essentially is like, oh, it's a sea world. I quite like that. So this height map, well, okay, that height map that we have now over here, we can also use using a colour ramp to dictate where the ground is and where the water is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a brand new colour ramp just here. I'm going to make it the same length as well, because the reason why I like stretching them out, because we have more control over the colour, but also with them stacked on top of each other, you can kind of see roughly where things are going to correlate, where they're going to come together. So I'm going to take the result, I'm going to stick it out of there, and I'm also going to pop this into here so I can just see where it is. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to crush this down. So we are now creating essentially a black-white map. But we're going to use this one to combine these two together. So I'm going to add, from color, a mix RGB, like this. And I'm going to say this is our background color. This is our foreground color. And then this, the color from this, is the factor between the two. So whatever is white will become our foreground color, and whatever is black will become our background color. So because of this, we want the land to be white and black. What we've got to do is we've got to take this and make that black, and then we've got to get this one, we've got to make this one white. So the sea will sit over the land. So the white area will be the sea, and the black area will be the land. drop that in there, and there we have it. Straight away, you've got a separation. Now the best thing about this is it means that we have more control over what we do here with what we do in our principal shader, because we've now got a value which when we change it, and in fact if I do this very quickly, if I set the white value to the bottom here, all the way down the bottom, sorry, there we go, like that, and I change this from linear to constant, we can now change the height of our seawater very quickly. We can actually animate that value as well. So if we click on that, we can insert a keyframe in there. So we can animate that position over time. So if you want to basically reveal your land, or you want to wash it all away, you've got the complete control there. Now, of course, you're going to have things like the shininess or all that sort of stuff, and you want to mess around with those. Well, that's why you separate things out here. So let's come here and let's, at the moment, if you look at this, it's relatively rough. So we're not getting a lot of information here. Now, what I'm going to do very quickly is I'm just going to add, I'm going to go here, I'm going to get a noise texture like this, and I'm going to plug, I'm going to basically, well, I'm going to get a bump texture. I'm going to get the factor of this, I'm going to show it into the height, I'm going to get the normal of this, I'm going to show it into the normal. And there you go, we've got our bump texture. Now, obviously, we haven't got any texture coordinate control, so again, because of the node wrangler, press Control T, that goes into there. Very nice, very quick and very simple. And we can increase the detail here, and we can increase the scale here. And let's keep on going with the scale, make it really nice and teeny tiny. But then we set the strength to 0.1, and that's still too high, 0.02. And there we start to get something that looks a little bit like it's got bumpy water. Yeah, we don't want too much, obviously, because unless the planet is really, really small, you're not going to get that sort of like wavy texture that's going to be visible from space. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to very quickly add the controls here, which will allow us to change the roughness, because if I make this less rough, there we go, you see that now looks like it's got multiple suns on it, but that now looks like it's got shiny water, but the land is shiny as well. So again, here we go, we've got a color ramp here. So let's add in, we can use a mix RGB, actually I think it's probably what we do, like a blend colors from Maya, if that's any help to anyone. So we take the color from this, plug it into the factor, and then we take the color from this and we plug this into the roughness. Now essentially, it won't go in, but it does of course. And we have two values here, and they're both white. So this is our land. So if we move that up, so color 1 essentially is at the background, color 2, we bring this down. So now you'll see if I scan this around over the land, it is not that shiny where the land is, but it is still that shiny where the water is. So we've got this lovely control. I'm going to change that to roughness sep. There we go. So that allows us to control the roughness with the colors there. That allows us to control the roughness with the colors, so we can make that even shinier. And then also while we're looking at that, we can say, right, well, that scale is 2. How much further can I go up there? Let's increase the roughness on this. That's better. Definitely feels more like water now. The strength of 0.0. Okay. So that feels there. And obviously we would like to have some sort of bump on the land as well. Well, that's pretty much simple enough. We're just going to move this a little bit further across so we can get the information into here. And I'll just move this up here and this up here. Okay. So here we go. Here's our roughness and our bump interacting and working well together. So let's get some information out of this again. So we've got our color ramp. So what we're going to do is we're going to create another bump node. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the value out of that and shove it in the height. There we go. So how do we combine these together? Well, actually, it's very much as simple as a blend color. Because essentially what you're getting here is you're combining the normal data. So we get a color, we create a mix RGB, and we stick our land, again, remember our land, which is this top one, into the color 1, and our sea bump into the color 2. And then we take our color ramp color and we drag that into the factor here, and we pop that over there into the normal. And so what it's doing is combining both bump heights together and separating them with the land controller. So you can see now we have land and we have sea. So if I increase the strength, if I just zoom in a bit more here and shift over this, if I can increase that, that's increasing the bump, the actual bump on the land. I think if you can see that if I do it a bit harder. There we go. And then if we move down here, we can increase the bump on the sea just a little bit. That really has to be just a teeny tiny amount. There you go. So essentially what we have there is our Earth, fundamentally. So now I'd like to mention fracturing your texture maps. At the minute, that is just straightforward the Musgrave texture, which is how this map range adjusted. But what we want to do is talk about adding some extra structure into this land, because at the minute it feels very much plains and mountains. It would be nice if there was some extra ridging. Now, the nicest ridging texture in this is in fact the Voronoi shader. So if I very quickly go in here and I go to texture and add a Voronoi texture. Let me just drag it over here for now. There we go, come on. Come down here. Right. I'm going to drag this and I'm going to drop this into the colour of this out into the colour of this and watch what happens. It's a Voronoi, but it's a colour Voronoi. Now that's straight away the first issue, which is you don't want the colour, I want the distance one. So that's why this thing is at the top, because this gives us basically a black-white ramp with height. Okay, so there you go. Now what you can see there, obviously we can see the bump that's on this as well. So let's just disconnect the bump for now. So here we have a Voronoi texture. And let's disconnect the roughness as well. Now I want to add some of these height bits, into our land. So we have some sort of like even more fractured, broken, high stuff. So I'm going to leave the randomness at 1, because if you change it off, it turns it basically into cubes. Stick it up there. I'm going to do Control T, so we get our stuff for the node wrangler. Move these up here. Change the point to texture. And I am going to increase the scale here. And for the sake of argument, I'm going to actually change the height on the Z. So it's a little bit more up and down in terms of its stretch. It just feels it's not so much around the planet, it's more up and down. So what I want to do now is I'm going to have to go back here. I'll just take this, move it all the way back here. And I'm going to take our height map, I'm going to drag this and do this here. Okay, right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine into this here. I'm going to use this Voronoi to adjust the mapping we already have here. So to do that, I'll bring it down here so we can see what we're doing. So we're going to go in here, we're going to go to converter, and we're going to vector math, and we're going to take the distance, stick it in that vector, and we're going to take the generated ones, stick it at the bottom one, and we're going to plug that vector into here. And immediately you can see what's happened. It is doing exactly what it should be doing, which is adding the Euclidean Voronoi over the top of everything. So if I just move these things around, or if I rotate this, you can see it's affecting the Musgrave dramatically, far too much in fact. The values are between 0 and 1, and it's too high. So the effect is correct, but the value is too high. So the best way to control that is to add a value between the Voronoi texture coming out and the additive texture there. So let's go in here, convert it. We're going to create some vector math. I'm going to plug that in there like this. I'm going to change this to multiply, and immediately go back to being the Musgrave because it's multiplying it by 0. So with my finger on shift, I'm going to just drag a little bit of that into there, a little bit into there, and a little bit more into the Z. So adding basically broken information. Now it looks a bit weird because at the minute this now is all a little bit too small. The scale has been made too big. So it feels a little bit more random. And if you're not happy with that, you can change it over to different systems. And you can also change it to different types of actual noise patterns. So I can increase the scale of this, like so. Set that at 0.05, 0.05, 0.05. So we now have, you can see there's a little bit, just little bits of differences going on in there. So instead of it being totally flat, now you don't have to use a Voronoi. Obviously, you could use a noise. You could use anything you like. But I kind of rock the Voronoi. I'm a big fan. Or Voronoi. I don't know. I call it a Voronoi. Anyway, so if we now, so that information has now gone into there. So if we now go back in here and we take this and we put this back into the color, there's a little bit more fractal information now in the land, you can see there. So we take this roughness, we plug it back into the roughness, and we take this and we'll change this to bump mix. Shove that into the normal. And now we've got a planet again with a little bit more roughness in this. Feels a little bit more realistic. You can keep on adding and adding and adding and adding to this. But what I am going to do very quickly is I'm going to add some difference to the land. Just a little bit of difference to the land, because at the minute it's very, very green and we would like it to be brown just in there. Or at least a little bit more like it's got sand in there. So I'm going to add in a new texture, and that is a gradient ramp. So just very quickly come over here, go to color, drop it into the base color. And you see this is just a ramp. There we go. So it's black at the bottom and white at the top. In fact, that's really pretty. I love that. Oh, look at that. And you can actually see now how it feels more mountainous with the Voronoi, the way it's just been breaking it up a little bit more. Oh, lovely. Again, getting too carried away with my own stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create this. It's going to be a mix RGB. I'm going to leave that in the base color now. Now I'm now going to add into this color mix RGB. And I'm going to drop this here like this. So we've still got the background being our earth, but we've now got the color white red over the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this color node of this ramp and drag it into the factor. What that means is now it's going to be none at the bottom and all at the top. But of course, that's what we want. We want the equator. So again, we have that beautiful thing of the color ramp where we take one of those, drop it into here, and then I can do this really simple thing. I'm going to change this, by the way, to a really vibrant red, just so I can see where it is. And I'm going to change it to, well, no, it's fine. Do that. So I'm going to bring this and this down together here, like this. And I am going to add another one in there, which I'm going to bring over here. Come on, there we go. Oh, I'm going to change this from RGB to non-color data. Sorry, otherwise it just puts it in the wrong place. So we can now say, right. So if I put this at 0.5, let's change this and make this black, and let's move this up. That is now slap bang in the middle, because we changed that from color, RGB color, to non-color. It's taking values from 0 to 1 out of the gradient ramp, and we now have an area in the middle which is currently red. Now that's not what we want, obviously. What we do want is it to be another version of this map. So let's do Shift D, drop this in here, pop that back into the factor, and then move this into our color. Now, of course, it looks exactly the same because it is the same. So we're going to go in, oops, let's make that there, and take this, get this green. I'm going to make that feel a bit more, you can start to see it in here, a bit more earthy. I'm going to take this green and we're going to make this one a bit more sandy. Sandy! So this is a bit more sand-like. There we go, let's raise that value. Yeah, let's move it even further around. There we go. And then this one we're going to make red. And this one I'm going to get rid of. If I bring that up, and I bring that up, we'll start to see dirt. There we go. Essentially it looks dirty over that section in the middle there. There we go. So now we've got something which is basically equatorial. Let's very, very quickly, and I do say very quickly, but obviously this takes time, as is very obvious. We need to add something else in here over the top of all of this. We need to add our polar ice caps, because we've got an equator. It's going to be cold at the top. So let's use this again and to do another mix RGB over the top of this. So let's add a color mix RGB into here. Let's duplicate this, Shift D, and this time rather than in the middle, we want the values of this to go into the top and bottom. So whoops. So let's take this, put this here, drop the color out of this into the factor. So we've got white, and instead now where it's at the middle, we're going to take that to the top. Take that to the bottom, sorry, and put that to there, so you can see we've got cold areas like this, and then we're going to move this up to here, create a new one, change that to white, and move that from there to about here. It's very, 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 very circular in its nature. And so we're going to very, very quickly fracture the edge of that. So let's go here with a color gradient. We're going to Control T to put in the mapping coordinates. And then let's use the height of this. So let's do the same as we did over here. And we're going to add some vector maths. So add, convert it, vector math. Let's drag this into the bottom one. There we go. Let's drag this into the top one and then stick those into the vector mapping. So what will happen is now that's using all of the stuff in the height map, and as you can see, it's fracturing it across the whole image, which is completely wrong because there's far too much information going in. So what we need to do again is go add here. So we're going to some vector math, and we're going to drop that in there, change that to multiply. There you go. And because it's on 0, it won't change the edge at all. So it looks absolutely fine. And then what we're going to do is very gently, with our finger on Shift. So let's move that until it stretches down. There you go. And you can see we seem to have lost a lot of our southern one. We've got a lot in the north. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add another vector math. Here we go. Just here. And we're going to move this back on itself. So what's happening is that small amount there is doing the creep on the middle of that. So that is also, you mean, it's going into the equatorial stuff as well. So I've actually managed to fracture it in 2 places at the same time, which really is probably a lot nicer. So if we were to basically just have a little look, if I drag this and drop them into the base color, the equator area now is being affected a lot more dramatically. So in the same way as this is for the polar regions. That's quite pretty actually, just like that. I like it. So let's plug those back into there. But what we will do is, because now our equatorial region is basically stretched a little bit, we'll just tuck these values in a bit so it takes it back towards the equator. And there you have essentially a planet. Not too bad really. Not too shabby. And it didn't take long, and it's all procedural, which means you can go in and ooh, inside. You can go in, and you won't lose any quality at all. Keep the detail, because it's procedural, it's not textural. It's not pixels, it's maths. But there you've got maths creating a planet. And then of course if you say, well that's nice, but I don't want my Earth to be that colour, I want my Earth to be purple. So you go in here and you change it to purple. And you change this one to green. So that one, you change this one to green, yes. And we move up the saturation of that green. And then this one here, we want this to be orange, because orange is beautiful, beautiful. Yep, so we change that to orange, and you see you can also have a lot more planetary fun. Anyway, I hope that's been of some help to you. Obviously I'll stick this on my website, and I'll stick it on the tubes, and I'll put it all over the place so you can find it and have a play yourself. Even, you know, mess around with the base file if you like. It's not that difficult to shader really. It just looks a bit messy. I could probably tidy it up a bit with layouts and groups and stuff. Probably will. But what you have there is a nicely controllable planet. And again, let's just very quickly do this, because I love doing this. Should we swamp it with water? So let's start. Loads of land, but then the polar ice caps melted and the whole world vanished underwater. Yeah. Anyway, I'm making far too much noise that I shouldn't be doing. Right, let's pop that back to being where it was. Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm happy with that. Right, until the next time, this is Gary for GMVFX signing off, and I will hopefully speak to you soon.